Hello everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again. I'm going to continue now with our series of classic anime reviews. I'm going to concentrate now on Patlabor 2. This is the anime science fiction sequel to the original animation from 1989 based on the successful science fiction franchise. It is directed by Mamoru Oshii. It was released in 1993 and it continues the adventures of the mobile labour police units and the ongoing fight against crime and terrorism. So we have the setup here in the beginning where we have a soldier who embarks on a UN peacekeeping mission and he all of a sudden comes under an ambush under various labours and he barely survives the mission without any backup or help. That's the kind of high octane action sequence that we get at the beginning of the movie, and then we jump forward where the story progresses, where we see a series of terrorist attacks. This starts initially with a missile attack on a Bay Bridge, and the Labour team has to investigate this, and they enlist the help of a government intelligence agent called Arakawa. And as we go on within the story and they continue to search for the culprits of the terrorist attacks, we get various issues in terms of government agendas and political strategies and economic status as the Labour team strive to find the culprit of the terrorist group. So what's good about Patlabor 2? What is good, again, is the animation. This was a feature of the first movie and it's a feature again of the second one here, where the animation standard has gone a notch up from the first movie. Again, just great realistic drawings of the city and the labours. Everything's just got a really kind of pristine, kind of very professional and sophisticated look about it all. Even now, I mean, when I remember when I watched it back in 1993 and I felt this was kind of cutting edge animation at the time, and animation holds up. You know, everything has got this fluid, very kind of modern day feel about it, very kind of present day world. Even though it's kind of set in a distant future, the animation all looks great on here. Another feature as well is the musical score, and it is the composer of this is Kenji Kawai, and if you know your anime or your manga, you know that this was the composer of the Ghost in the Shell. And you can tell here as well, the music here is very sophisticated. We get very kind of quiet, serene kind of tones, which creates a great atmosphere as we get certain sequences throughout the movie in terms of what's going on within the terrorist group and how the city comes under a certain occupation. We get these great kind of montage sequences as we see people under the duress and the pressures of these terrorists attack, and it's got a very composed feel about it. It really kind of sets the mood and the tone for what this sequel is about. And to segue into that, another feature of Patlabor 2 is the subject matter. Whilst the first one, again, it did have a certain intelligence, but there was a lot more kind of action orientated feel about the first movie. The second movie, the subject matter is a lot more deeper. You know, we're talking a lot more now about political status, government and police agendas, economic issues within Japan. This is very much what you would call anime of a lot much more mature level. You know, we've normally get anime in terms of science fiction or horror or space adventure, but this is very much grounded, steeped more in realism. This has a feel very much more of a kind of a Tom Clancy terrorist kind of thriller. If you look at very much the Jack Ryan kind of movies, that's the same kind of tone that we're looking at here. So depending on your own perception of anime, you know, whether you are more into the action, fantasy kind of style of anime, or whether you do like something that's a bit more thought-provoking, a bit more intelligent, a bit more philosophical. And we get a lot of that in terms of the ramifications and the consequences of this terrorist group, the Japanese economy, and the kind of fractions or the frail relationship with other international communities. So it's very quite deep into the subject matter here. So if you do like that more tone, then I think you will enjoy this here. And this culminates in what I believe is the best scene of the movie. I talked a lot about the music and the tone of the subject matter, and we go into this scene here. It's between Goto and Arakawa, and I think it's kind of middle part of the movie where we talk about what is a just peace, what is a just war, and it's a great sequence. It kind of, they're both on the bay and we see Goto on the boat and he's looking at the skyline and various buildings, and he reflects more on what Arakawa is saying in terms of, are we better off living in a state where we have a peace, or is it a false peace, or where we have a war, and is it justified? Are we ever in a situation where we can have a justified reason for going to war, or is it better to have a peace that, regardless of how it was achieved, how it came about, whether there's a truth to it or falseness to it, is it always better to strive for peace as opposed to being a just war? It's a fantastic scene, it's a fantastic sequence. The music and the cinematography all flows together in one. And again, that's part of what I talked about, again, that mature, more deep, thoughtful subject matter within anime, and it's a great scene. It's a standout sequence. We also have another sequence of, as I mentioned before, the occupation of the city, and again the musical score really comes to fruition. So that's all good if you want a much more of a deep, meaningful anime. So I'll go on to what didn't work as well in the sequel. And I mentioned before in my review of the first movie that the plot moves very slowly, and again, unfortunately, this is a facet of the second sequel where, again, the plot just takes really a long time to get forward and get moving in really engrossing you into the compelling story throughout on it. It just lacks a real kind of intensity and momentum in the story. You know, again, we're talking about big consequences here. We're talking about big impactful moments, big impactful issues, but you never really feel it. There's a serious lack of action. I mean, I mentioned in the first movie that lacked action, but we get a serious deficit of action sequences throughout Honor. There's stuff going on. There's one sequence where we have a kind of plane attack, and they choose more to focus on the screens, if you look, on how the plane attack is visualized rather than actually the intensity of the plane attack itself. And this is something that I think hurts the movie throughout. We get certain sequences where they feel very lackluster, and I think this is more of a case of the kind of producers trying to showcase more animation, right, as opposed to create something that's really kind of compelling and thrilling to watch. And this was a bit like Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell, I think, had a fault in this also, and I think Patlabor 2 suffers from this. There just isn't that real compelling drive to the story. It runs, I think, about an hour and 45 minutes, but it feels even longer. It feels closer to 2 hour, maybe even longer than a 2 hour mark. The characters, again, as I mentioned in the first movie, they really come across as a bit bland and they lack a bit of personality. We kind of do away with the younger characters that we did from the first movie. So, you know, the likes of Asuma and Noah and Ota, they kind of get phased away in this movie, and we focus primarily more on Goto and Nagumo especially, and really she should be at the forefront because we get hints at a backstory and her connection to the leader of the terrorist group. But again, we never really utilize that. We never build a kind of emotional core or an emotional bond with these characters. They just feel a bit too distant and a bit too functional. And I think, again, the story suffers as a result on it. There's no real attachment to these characters. So again, even though we get an action sequence near the end, there's a serious lack of tension and drive and momentum as we go on throughout the story. So if I had to give Patlabor 2 an overall score, it would be a 6.7 out of 10. Great animation, stunning musical score, you know, very sophisticated and composed look about the animation. But unfortunately, again, there's a real lack of characterization and a real lack of pace and intensity within the story. And unfortunately, there's a severe absence of action, which, like, again, I think proves detriment towards the movie overall. So those are my thoughts on Patlabor 2. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you prefer it to the first movie? Did you like the fact that it was a much more deeper, meaningful kind of subject matter? Or did you want a lot more kind of science fiction, action-orientated pace within the story, and you felt that the film itself suffered from a lack of action and intensity within the story? So those are my thoughts for now on Patlabor. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please like, share and subscribe and help me try to grow this channel. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.